What secrets are hidden inside this Wid Conroy T206 card that will help us determine when the very first T206 cards were printed back in 1909? Because that still remains one of the biggest mysteries of the set. When did these cards hit that printing press for the very first time? But before we get there, my name is Chris, otherwise known on X and Instagram as at CRT_Sportscards. And if you want to learn more about T206, hit that subscribe button so you are notified when my very next T206 video gets released. Now, stepping back in time just a little bit and trying to have the mindset of one of the creators from the American Tobacco Company about this set, you would argue that they want to be absolutely perfect during this very first printing. They want to have every single name spelled correctly. They want to have every team listed correctly. They also want to have the right photos for the players. But life happens. And in baseball, what is the number one thing that can happen that can destroy all of your hard work if you're designing a Wid Conroy T206 card? That would be an official Major League Baseball transaction. So the date is February 17th, 1909. Washington, let's say, calls up New York and says, I want to purchase Wid Conroy for $5,000. New York says, sure. And there it is. February 17th, 1909 is the single best marker that we have for when these cards could have been produced, because before that date, this card could not have existed. But that fact alone is not the only reason why this card is so unique. When you look up Wid Conroy in Baseball Reference, you are going to see him listed as a third baseman. But when you take a look at this card again, you're going to notice he's left-handed. How many third basemen are left-handed in the history of the game? So something doesn't add up. And it all starts to make a lot of sense when you look at the actual photo that they used for this card, because it looks like it was very intentional and it looks like it was a last-minute decision based on the fact that he was purchased by Washington on that fateful day. So here we have Wid Conroy as a third baseman, as a right-handed player, which makes a ton of sense when you see the actual photo for the card. But he's in his New York uniform though. They can't release the first printing of T206 and have a player on the incorrect team if that player changed teams before the set came out. So I can only imagine the panic that set in at the American Tobacco Company when this transaction happened on February 17th, 1909. So what is the best way to fix it? Well, let's take a look at the image compared to the card to figure out what they did here. So moving left to right here, using on the very left the original source material with his New York uniform as a right-handed third baseman. The goal here is you have to hide the New York in the card because you're putting it out with a Washington team name at the bottom. So using the photo there, they flip it. So now he's a left-handed third baseman, but you can still see the N for New York on the uniform. So now what you do is you cut in the photo a little bit more. You're left with the top part of the Y, but then that third photo comes into becoming the actual T206 card. You will see on the uniform though, this mainly probably is more of a conspiracy theory, but you can really see a Y in white right there by his arm in the actual T206 card. But now here is the actual card flipped back again for him to be an actual right-handed third baseman. And this is where you will now see the second tell of the card. And look, the creators of the set were not bashful around putting stadiums in the backgrounds of cards. But if you notice, when you reference back the source material for this card, the stadium is missing and it's grass from top to bottom. So they knew that if they included the stadium in this card and then flipped it, it would be almost just an immediate, what are you doing with this card? So how do you hide it? You get rid of the stadium in the background. But then the third and final tell on this card is when you look at it compared to other New York cards and Washington cards. So here are various Washington and New York players from the 150 series of the T206 set. You'll notice here, they did a really good job of coloring in the red brim hat from New York to make it black like Washington. The big difference though is the collar. The other Washington cards all have a black collar, whereas Conroy still has a white collar on his card. Now, when you look at other later printed Washington cards, they do have that white collar as well, so it's not always the black collar, but it's interesting to see the Wid Conroy card compared to his previous teammates, which he was a part of before February 17th as a member of New York. And by the way, Conroy is not unique from the aspect of he's the only player that was traded right around the original production of T206. A day before Conroy gets traded or purchased by Washington, Cy Young gets moved from Boston to Cleveland, and Cy Young has 2 cards in the very first printing of T206. The key here with Conroy is this is the latest transaction that happened for the players that are in the very first printing of the T206 set. So if February 17th was a transaction date, you would have to argue that the first printing of T206 didn't happen until sometime in early March of that 1909 season. And then one thing that would just be an absolute wild find for this set would be the printing plate with Wid Conroy in a New York uniform as a right-handed third baseman. We have never seen a Conroy card come out that looks like that, so I don't honestly believe it exists. But if you wanted to have a very unique one-card T206 collection that's not going to break your bank, there is no better card than Wid Conroy. Not only because of the fact that it's backwards, but it's because this is the last known transaction that happened for the players that are included in the very first printing of the T206 picture card set.